7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Is this the tether?
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A weird game at SoFi Stadium last night, but the Chargers hung on and got the W. They beat Philadelphia 22-19 in overtime, a game that had 8 turnovers. Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert was sacked 7 times. Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts had 4 interceptions. The last one ended a potential game-winning drive in overtime at the 1-yard line. The Chargers are 9-4. HBCU Florida A&M is looking for a new head football coach. James Cozy was fired Monday. Cozy was 12-12 in 2 seasons, including 5-7 this year. Gotta give a shout out to my alma mater, Illinois State University. The football team is coming to California this weekend to play UC Davis Saturday in the quarterfinals of the Division I AA playoffs. We're coming to Cali after knocking off the number 1 team in the nation, undefeated North Dakota State, 29-28. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Celebrate the soul of the holidays and support Altadena and Pasadena. Join us on Monday, December 15th, 7 p.m. inside the Bram Goldsmith Theater at the Wallace in Beverly Hills for Soul of the Holidays, a joyful night of Motor City Soul, gospel, and holiday classics featuring an 18-piece band, all-star vocalist, and community choirs, all in support of the Black LA Relief and Recovery Fund. This performance comes at a pivotal time for many in Altadena and Pasadena. This is their first holiday season since the devastating Altadena Eden Canyon fire, which destroyed homes and community spaces. While the physical losses are immense, the power of community remains, and your attendance directly supports recovery, resilience, and renewal. So, be sure to join us Monday, December 15th, 7 p.m. inside the Bram Goldsmith Theater at the Wallace in Beverly Hills for Soul of the Holidays, benefiting survivors of the Altadena Eden Canyon fire. For ticket information, just log on to tickets@thewallace.org. That's tickets@thewallace.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580 and the Black Freedom Fund.
Oh yeah, I get around. Still clown when the underground, when we come around. Stronger than ever. Back to get wrecked. All respect to those who break their neck to keep their check, cause oh, they sweat a brother majorly. And I don't know why your girl keeps paging me. She tell me that she needs me, cries when she leaves me, and every time she sees me, she squeeze me. Lady, take it easy. Hate to sound sleazy, but tease me. I don't want it if it's that easy. Hey yo, bust it. Baby got a problem saying bye-bye. Just another hazard of a fly guy. Your ass wide don't matter. My pockets got fatter. Now everybody's looking for the ladder. And ain't no need in being greedy. If you wanna see me, try to keep a number, baby, when you need me. And I'll be there in a jiffy. Don't be picky, just be happy with this quickie. But when you learn, you can't time it down, baby doll. Check it out. I get around. What you mean you don't know? Check it go. I get around.
KBLA Talk 1580. I digress. Rest in peace, Pac. Gone, but never, ever, ever forgotten. All right, I'm so excited to have joining me an assistant professor in the Center for the Study of Higher and Post-Secondary Education at the University of Michigan Marcel Family School of Education. He's a writer, researcher on race, racism, systems of oppression, structures of domination in U.S. higher education and its social context. He is... Well, we miss him. He used to be out here at USC, but now he's gone to Michigan. Dr. Charles H.F. Davis, welcome.
Hi, Dominique. So good to be with you.
Good to hear your voice. And we were just on a deep dive about the Diddy documentary. That's why I had to play that Pac.
Naturally.
Yeah, naturally I had to play that Pac. But, how you doing? I worry about all of my friends who are professors and scholars at this point in history. It seems like I never thought I'd be saying that. I usually am more worried about my friends who are rappers or, people in the industry, but right now it seems like a perilous time to be a professor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the interesting things being on a college university campus day in and day out is the extent to which we often believe them to be sort of like protected spaces, right? And a lot of folks on the right and, sort of conservative think tanks and other folks have sort of tried to position the university as this very liberal, even leftist space. And those of us who work in these places know that they're anything other than that. And so it comes as no surprise to me, as it does to many of my colleagues and comrades in the academy, that, the light has been shown on us and has continued to be a thing that we are navigating in the courses that we teach and the research that we conduct and our ability to be active and to organize, as a collective force of labor on a college university campus. And so it's certainly been a difficult and trying time. We've seen, another inflection of that in the wake of what happened in September that's affected me personally and a number of colleagues and comrades that I know as well.
What are you referencing when you say what happened in September?
So as we know, Charlie Kirk was shot in
that's what I thought.
Utah in September on a university campus, which I think cannot be understated, engaging in one of his many quote-unquote debates with, everyday college goers. And in the wake of that, we have seen a considerable amount of backlash and uptake by those who supported him and his causes, those who were sympathetic. We've seen the elevation and almost martyrdom, if you will, of, he and his legacy that comes with also many of us who have been listed on the Turning Point USA Professors Watch List, myself for almost a decade, and a number of other people who have come under strict scrutiny and under fire by the state, whether that's the sort of federal government's intervention on this or individual states for those who work at public universities and even some private universities that have continued to receive levels of harassment and threats, not only in the wake of his shooting, but also in the times in between. Someone, as you mentioned, was previously, this is the thing that I experienced even during my time there, and it's continued to experience since I've been a professor at the University of Michigan.
You've been on the Turning Point USA watch list for 10 years?
For about,
That's
I don't know that
crazy.
It's quite 10 years old, but yeah, I remember
as
being
long as
on
it's
it.
been around, basically.
More or less. I remember sort of being added to it during my time at USC. I'd written an essay that was talking about a racist incident that happened on campus, and that sort of began, I guess, long tenure of being someone who's been investigated by various RAD publications and organizations, quote-unquote news organizations affiliated with the right-wing industrial media complex. And it comes with, a considerable amount of attention. There are these entire profiles have been created to represent certain faculty members and their work in ways that suggest that we should be targeted and have been targeted. And so it's been a very much up and down part of my career, and recently came to a head in September when myself and my family were doxxed in the wake of the shooting of Charlie Kirk.
And are you guys safe now, or is this ongoing?
We are physically safe now, and the harassment ebbs and flows. I haven't received anything really recently, but it was very, very intense for about the 10 to 14 days in the immediate wake of that shooting. So much so that it forced my family and I to have to flee and to leave our home. And again, a number of other comrades and colleagues had to deal with very similar things. I've had students who have been harassed as a consequence of the work that they've been doing, and perhaps even in some ways their proximity to me and my work, and a number of other people who have actually, had to lose their jobs. Right, we know that folks have been getting fired in a variety of places. That, of course, includes faculty, but also staff members who have less or fewer protections on a college university campus. You've seen that databases have been constructed of folks who have said, quote unquote, disparaging things about Charlie Kirk, most of which, as we look at those data, are simply copy and paste, right? Simply replaying and reposting things that he had said many times on his podcast or in his speeches, but that those folks have been targeted disproportionately, many of whom have had, life-altering, consequences as a result of that database.
I mean, my first real run-in with them was when Kirk was murdered, and I made the comment on the air that I didn't think the flag should be at half staff because they, if they're not going to put them at a half staff for, people who actually sacrificed for this country, why would they put them at half staff for this dude? And Breitbart decided to, retweet that And then we started getting threats at the station. I started getting threats and such. But I think they had so many people that they had to track that they just, I wasn't a big enough fish. And they ended up kind of but I can see if they've been following you for a long time, and it makes sense. Not that it makes sense, because no one should be on a list and have to be doxxed. I'm really sorry, you and your family have to go through that. You got a little one,
That's right.
There's a lot of stress. I feel for your wife. I just, what I was referencing is that you've been an activist your whole life. As far as I tracked your life, you've been an activist since before you were a professor.
That's right. Yeah, I sort of come of age at a time. I'm an elder millennial, and so sort of my first entree into, sort of bigger level organizing was in the wake of Trayvon Martin's murder in Florida. And part of that is as someone who went to college in Florida, organized in Florida, originally for a young boy named Martin Lee Anderson, who was a 13-year-old boy killed in the Bay Area boot camp by guards there. That, organizing has been very much a part of my coming of age and my maturation, but I've come from a long line of organizers. My Uncle John was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. My father is from Tuskegee, Alabama, and grew up at the height of the Civil Rights Movement. And so it's very much just a part of a tradition in which we stand. And as well as anyone, right, that in BLM grassroots that we talk about us being but a marker on the long history of struggle for self-determination. And so this is very much a part of it, and something that obviously comes into think about my research, something that comes into I think about my teaching, but really also in the ways that I want to show up for students who have always been sort of the canary in the mine for very many political issues that are happening, not just on college and university campuses, but in the nation as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I feel like as a child or a person who comes out of a family or tradition of activism, there's two ways to go. You either go get a job on Fox News and, and get paid handsomely to sell out your heritage, or you are probably more committed and more, more prepared for these moments of peril.
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the things that we talk a bit about in organizing, but certainly in quote-unquote radical academic spaces is, to whom are we answerable, right, and to who do we belong? And those of us in the academy, steeped in the Black radical tradition, understand that we are in the academy, but not of the academy. And that means that we find our primary communities, we find our resources in the communities to whom we belong, right? And I know that in our situation, when, things started to move pretty rapidly, it was community organizers who came to our aid. It was those who offered, whatever resources we may need, whether that be security, whether that be a safe house or resources for us to be able to get out of town. That community was the folks who stepped up. And I can only attribute that to, various other comrades and colleagues who work in the academic space of always encouraging me to make sure that I understood that, when the university disabuses itself of me and others, that we have to have somewhere that we need to go. And that place can only exist if we've remained in community with everyday Black people, right? And so I think that's something that's very instructive, especially for younger scholars who are coming up in this particular moment, who are having to navigate some of the tensions of, the university wanting to have them all to themselves, and our understanding that we are labor, right, and that we can be discarded and disabused at any point in time. And if we betrayed or turned our back on our community, we're not going to have anywhere to go, and we're not going to have anyone to take care of us in our moment of need. And so I think that's just been really useful and instructive, especially during my time in Los Angeles, working with our comrades, Melina Abdullah and Tabitha Jones-Gillivet, who are both academics in their own right, but also been really steeped in community and in organizing.
Yeah. Talking with Dr. Charles H.F. Davis. And you, if you have a question or conversation you want to join in, 800-920-1580. I'm Dominique DePrima for KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DePrima when we come forward.
I got the champagne. Everybody's glass.
KBLA Talk 1580 congratulates our own Keith Underwood, host of the weekend entertainment show Black in the Green Room, on his recent honor at the annual National Arts and Entertainment Journalism Awards. Keith received a first place award presented by the Los Angeles Press Club for his entertainment reporting, and we couldn't be prouder. Congratulations, Keith, from all of us at KBLA Talk 1580.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With the Capital One Venture X card, you earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy. Plus, you get premium benefits at a collection of luxury hotels when you book on Capital One Travel. And with Venture X, you get access to over 1,000 airport lounges worldwide. Open up a world of travel possibilities with the Capital One Venture X card. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Kohl's Customer Appreciation Event is here, right in time for the gift exchange. Even though everyone pretends gifting isn't a competition, it kinda is. At Kohl's, save on gifts everyone will fight over. From sweaters and flannels to air fryers, toaster ovens, and more. Because deep down, the gift exchange isn't just about giving. It's also about winning. Shop Kohl's and save on top gifts now. Select styles, some exclusions apply. Offers end December 14th. See store or Kohls.com for details.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year with promo code NEWS. Visit lifelock.com. Terms apply.
Your ambition just met its match with Robinhood. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. All investments involve risk, including loss of principal. Options, futures, and crypto trading carry significant risk and may not suit all investors. Securities offered through Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Futures trading is offered by Robinhood Derivatives LLC, not FDIC or SIPC protected. Crypto offered through Robinhood Crypto LLC, NMLS ID 1702840, not FDIC or SIPC protected. Portfolio management offered by Robinhood Strategies, an SEC registered advisor.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
The conversation continues right now with Dominic DePrima on First Things First.
Dr. Charles H.F. Davis is my guest, and he was just sharing the environment on the campus and what you and your family have had to go through. I can only imagine. Your wife she's got to be pretty strong. When you have a little one, it's things that normally wouldn't ruffle you that much can make you really stressed out. So I pray she's doing okay.
Yeah, she's hanging in there. She's been just a great, partner and someone who's always supported me in our work and trying to just make the world a better place, especially for our young ones. And I just can't express my deep sense of gratitude and appreciation for her being my partner in this particular moment.
Yeah, that's amazing. Prayers and good thoughts on you guys. And I love the way you said, the way you stated about how we have to stay connected and in community. I think that applies not just to academics, whether you're a so-called celebrity, an artist, a business executive. We are not disposable when we're connected to a purpose and our people.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, that's also one of the things that being in Los Angeles for the time that we were there and working with folks like Kendrick Sampson and the Build Power organization and other social impact groups that are Revolve Impact who have done a really excellent job of trying to ensure that celebrity culture, as it were, isn't something that then disconnects those of us who come from community from staying in community. And we've seen, very much, how important that has been in the wake of, the strikes that have happened in Hollywood, the various numbers of actors, writers, producers who have had their employment either, rescinded or lost as a consequence of their political work. And, of course, where do they turn particular moments? It's going to be to communities that can then hold them up on the basis of their, ongoing commitment to this particular work. So I think it's just so important for all of us to think of it in that way, right? That when we are people in need, very rarely, especially now when we're seeing this ongoing threat to various Black institutions that are, created to stand in the gap where, the state has sort of failed us routinely, that we have to be in relationship with one another. And I think especially as individuals come under attack, because we live in this, sort of American culture that prides itself on individualism and sort of doing things on one's own. And we know that nothing happens in that particular way, that we all have help and we all have support. But when we approach this exercise as individuals and we become isolated, it's so much easier for us to become vulnerable to harm and violence, right, in the absence of that protection. And sometimes that's geographic, which is, certainly been our case in a place like Michigan, of being out of, close proximity to our people. That makes it a little bit easier for us to get to. When, this happened in Los Angeles, it would have been much more difficult, partly because we were, wrapped in community. We lived in a particular location in Los Angeles. It was much harder to get to, and we weren't sort of be able to be singled out as a young Black family, and also had not had kids at that particular point. But, community was always there to show up. And even at afar, we're still able to show up for us, despite those distances, because we have networks of people, right, who understand what it is that we're doing and how that we are equally committed to this particular exercise.
You said earlier in the conversation that we know that these universities are not liberal bastions. A lot of them, come from old money, and they have donors and boards of directors and boards of regents that tend to be very conservative. I mean, I remember that going back to my time in college. It's been a long time, right? At that moment in history, we're fighting about apartheid and Iran Contra, and occupying the building to make sure they didn't shut down the School of Ethnic Studies. I went to San Francisco State,
right.
But there was always tension with the administration, with the faculty, with the regents, and we never. Even though the stereotype is that these are liberal institutions, we never felt that way from the folks who were really in power. It might be professors that, Dr. Angela Davis was one of my professors. So obviously I was blessed with some, radical professors, but the power structure was never that. But I feel like it's gone another notch. I know that when we, when we would get called on the carpet for occupying a building or whatever, they'd try to drag us out of there, or they would, sit down and talk to us, or they would reject our demands. But what they did not do is try to go after our jobs and keep us from getting degrees. And those are the kinds of consequences I see students facing now.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a very long history, obviously, of student activism on college and university campuses, and to any extent that we might think of them as liberal or leftist spaces, right? And that's really, reductionist, I think, in terms of an analysis, but that even the emergence of ethnic studies, for example, comes as a consequence of engaged people doing the activist work that's so necessary so that they can have some level of pedagogical inclusion or epistemic justice to serve and support their needs. And yet we have to think about what was the established power structure at the time and how has that been able to be consistent, where, if there are quote unquote radical aspects of the university, those are few and far between. Because as you mentioned, right, like higher education governance is such that, especially a public institution, one that is vulnerable to the whims of the broader political climate. And we've seen that not only have more conservative voices taken up space in boards of governors and boards of regents, but even in the sort of absence of those particular political markers, that they have made more conservative and right-wing types of decisions, particularly when it comes to the suppression and repression of student activism on campus, of organized labor on campus, including some faculty unions, but also graduate student unions. And as we've seen sort of over time, that the role of higher education in society, at least in terms of its ability to provide and confer credentials that are supposed to gain access to types of jobs that allow for increased life-making possibilities, that those credentials are now being weaponized against students, right? They're being withheld, transcripts are being withheld, people are not being allowed to graduate. Not dissimilarly, faculty are being told that their sabbaticals may be withheld, or they're not going to be able to go for promotion and tenure as a consequence of their, political engagement that otherwise we would understand to be somewhat protected, right, under the quote-unquote First Amendment, even though we know that there are limitations there. So I think you're absolutely right in that because higher ed's become such more of a conduit or an apparatus by which life-making is possible, it's been able to be weaponized by those who have been in places of power. And we see that a lot even with the student debt crisis, right, that's probably the foremost thing that limits folks' ability, especially Black students' ability, to successfully begin their lives after they've graduated college, because they're saddled with this racialized and gendered debt going into a racist and sexist labor market that sort of has entrapped them and sometimes left people worse off than when they entered college when they're coming out.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons I was so alarmed when I saw that the Trump administration is now trying to go after the loan forgiveness programs based on ideology, where they're saying now, where they'll deny you a loan forgiveness program that you are actually eligible based on your politics.
Right. And I think that's, again, sort of a hallmark, as we've seen, the veil of fascism being pulled back slowly but surely, in a way that they're trying to institute another form of state control. We know that debt is a huge part of that. Of course, student debt is amongst the more significant crises that we see in the country, but also medical debt. And sometimes those things are intertwined, right? We know that students who were brutalized as the encampments for Palestinian self-determination were torn down. Many of them experienced on behalf of their universities and those police departments, some of whom sustained, physical and psychological injuries, received medical bills because if those things happened during the summer, they did not have insurance or medical coverage, right? And now they're sort of strapped with medical debt in addition to student debt, really as a consequence of the different types of violences that the university has inflicted upon them.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't considered that, but it makes sense. I guess the question is why. When I would go to Dr. Davis's class, there would be young Republicans protesting every single day. Okay, and this is years and years ago. Every day they'd be protesting and harassing us when we were trying to go into our class. But again, Dr. Davis kept her job. When she left San Francisco State, she went to UC Santa Cruz. We didn't get threatened. And so why? I mean, you've said, that there's more conservative folks on some of these boards of governors and such. And we've seen particularly with the Palestinian, the pro-Palestinian or peace protests, the big donors stepping in, big donors flexing and saying, well, we should have say so over campus policies. But why? Because I just feel like they wouldn't have been able to do it before. They wouldn't have been able to get away with it. People would have said this is an infringement on academic freedoms, or this is an infringement. This is not how we do business in a democracy. The state doesn't get to tell a private university or even a state university what to teach. That's what they do in so-called totalitarian countries. Why is that okay now?
Well, I think there's been a certain public acceptance of the role of this administration, but the federal government more generally, to encroach upon things that we've either, had some sort of demarcations about who has authority in what ways. And part of that points to moneyed interest, like you mentioned, right, that not only with individual donors for places that, thrive upon the donations of those who have money and have, in some way, shape, or form engaged in wage theft that allows them to accumulate these resources, but also the federal government engaging in these shakedowns of universities in order to force compliance upon them, right? That money is, and capitalism more broadly, right? Academic capitalism specifically is governing so much more of how the university has shifted. I mean, we can look at tuition costs, for example. I talked about student debt briefly, but, you can think about the cost of tuition at a place like San Francisco State when you were a student and how drastically that has increased over time.
Yeah,
right?
It's crazy.
For a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Right, but that we've sort of seen this ballooning of costs for universities to operate and run, and where you hear, say, a Bernie Sanders talk about, being able to work one's way through school, which is just not a tenable thing, right? Even as a faculty member at a place that does not have a, tuition program, at least explicitly for faculty, that I have money to even send my kid to the University of Michigan when they become eligible in college age. And this is the case for many faculty across the country. And so finances has a lot to play in how people are making these decisions, whether they agree with them or not, right? It's that university resources are at stake, and whatever the cost in order to recover those resources, universities are willing to pay, and that's usually at the expense of people, whether it's the people inside of the university or it's those who live in proximity to the university. We're seeing university partnerships for data centers to be things that are coming recently, and we know where those data centers go, right? Yeah. They go into already under-resourced and extracted from areas, usually Black and brown, and we know the environmental consequences of the development of these data centers is going to desperately affect, the life outcomes of people in those neighborhoods, and all for the benefit of gaining more profitability. And so I think that's a huge consideration when we think about why institutions are moving in this particular way. And again, as you mentioned, the rise of sort of authoritarianism and fascism is deeply intertwined with this. And we've seen this in places all around the world in which the U.S. has also been sort of undermining, the sovereignty of those places. But we're seeing it, in real time here. On
Dr. Davis, hold that thought. We've got news, traffic, and sports, and we'll continue this fascinating conversation only right here.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Bree Wood with BIN News Now. Chicago's Black Mayor Brandon Johnson warns the city could face a shutdown if a budget isn't passed by year's end.
A shutdown benefits nobody, least of all the poor and working people of Chicago who rely upon critical services that the city provides.
He's open to compromise but won't cut programs for the poor. Georgia prosecutors say 1-8 Trey Blood's gang leader Jamar Ramsey lured kids with ice cream trucks and bounce houses while running a multi-state crime spree. 16 members are now convicted for murder, shootings, and drug trafficking across 10 counties from 2019 to 2022. And Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You is back at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for a record-tying 19th week. Other holiday hits fill the top 5, including Wham's Last Christmas and Bobby Helms' Jingle Bell Rock. Get BIN News now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
For victims of drunk and drug driving, our grief is unique. But you are not alone. You always have a place at MAD. Call our 24-hour victim helpline at 877-MAD-HELP or visit mad.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A weird game at SoFi Stadium last night, but the Chargers hung on and got the W. They beat Philadelphia 22-19 in overtime, a game that had 8 turnovers. Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert was sacked 7 times. Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts had 4 interceptions. The last one ended a potential game-winning drive in overtime at the 1-yard line. The Chargers are 9-4. HBCU Florida A&M is looking for a new head football coach. James Cozy was fired Monday. Cozy was 12-12 in 2 seasons, including 5-7 this year. Gotta give a shout out to my alma mater, Illinois State University. The football team is coming to California this weekend to play UC Davis Saturday in the quarterfinals of the Division I AA playoffs. We're coming to Cali after knocking off the number 1 team in the nation, undefeated North Dakota State, 29-28. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Days after the Eaton fire devastated entire neighborhoods in Pasadena and Altadena, Black Freedom Fund, an organization that invests in leaders and organizations transforming black communities, established the Black LA Relief and Recovery Fund. The Black LA Relief and Recovery Fund is supporting local organizations, providing direct resources to families, and making sure that recovery reflects the needs and voices of the people who live there. For many, the journey to rebuild is just beginning, and the Black Freedom Fund is committed to being with them every step of the way. Stand with Dina. Donate by texting Black LA to the number 707070. That's Black LA to 707070. Together, we can help our neighbors rebuild their homes, lives, and hope. The Black Freedom Fund is proud to sponsor Conversation Live, Altadena Rising, with James Farr on KBLA, Talk 1580.
If you've been diagnosed with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis, this is what it sounds like to be a million miles away. Imagine being a million miles away. Tremfya Guselkumab, taken by injection, is a prescription medicine for adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis who may benefit from taking injections or pills or phototherapy. With Tremfya, clearer skin is possible. In clinical trials, at least 70% of patients saw at least 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks. Results may vary. Tremfya is also indicated for adults with active psoriatic arthritis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections and liver problems may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor about Tremfya. Call 1-800-526-7736 or visit tremfya.com.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate loses and love wins.
And we're talking with Dr. Charles H.F. Davis. He's a professor at the Center for the Study of Higher and Post-Secondary Education at the University of Michigan. Also one of the founders of Scholars for Black Lives. And one of the things I've said, Dr. Davis, on the show is that I feel like we have to make a pledge every day to be courageous, because it is a bit scary. And I don't know what the alternative is, living in fear, but how do you stay 10 toes down?
I mean, if I'm going to be honest, there are moments where I waver, I think like we all do. And I talk a lot with my students who, are broadly sort of engaging in diversity, equity, and inclusion work, or at least had been up until this particular point, with what it means to two things. I think, one, what does it mean to think about our commitment to this work through a lens of risk and relinquish? That is to say that in doing this, we have to be willing to risk and relinquish some of the privileges that we've accrued and have been afforded to us by virtue of our social identities and position in society, or other things that we've accrued through our credentials and positions within structures and organizations. Because in the absence of being willing to risk and relinquish something, there's always a point at which one will no longer do this particular work, right? And part of that is these institutions and organizations sort of attempt to hold hostage, right? Again, your life-making possibility, which could be your job, it could be your degree program. In exchange for that, you have to offer your silence. And they do this especially to those of us who have gained greater notoriety, or have, significant influence. And so I think that's an important thing to understand, that these things don't come without some level of a cost. And we all should be able to decide, because we're differently positioned to harm, what those costs may be. But I think the other part of this goes to a thing that Mary Hooks, who's, organizer in Georgia, and she talks about this idea that we all have to be willing to be transformed in service of this work. And I think that part for me is the thing that always sits, right? As someone who was doing this, as you mentioned, sort of prior to becoming a parent, that being an organizer has deeply shaped how I think about parenting, and who I'm in community with when it comes to questions about parenting from, some sort of abolitionist position. And, I have a group chat with a number of dads who are part of the Dream Defenders organization down in Florida, and have since also had children. And we just have this, amazing space where we can talk as parents who have been part of this revolutionary tradition of trying to figure out what does it mean to exercise these politics in practice. And so, when it comes to the consistency, that, we also have questions. We're also sometimes not sure if certain risks are worth it and how those risks are different now that we are parents. As, someone with, 2 children who, again, come from this particular tradition, whose names emerge from this tradition as well, are very concerned about the stories that we might be told about us, years later in our life, that when, my son or daughter asks, Daddy, what were you doing when, the encampments were happening on your campus? And I can't affirmatively say that I was there in support and in solidarity and conducting teach-ins and supporting students with their strategies and trying to figure out how to make the university a better place. I don't know that I could look them in the face honestly and be proud of who I was or the example I tried to provide and show. But the same thing for my students. I can't write and talk and teach about these things and not demonstrate them on a regular, routine basis. So I think that's what holds me accountable for the things that I espouse. And also when there are moments when I have limitations, that because of community, I'm able to take a step back and community can step up while I focus on the things that are most important and immediate, which is, of course, going to be my family.
Yeah. I'm smiling to myself because, no matter what we do, it's never going to be enough for our kids.
That's right.
I mean, I have my child is now in college, so all the conversations about affordability are really real for me right now. But it's also those conversations you're citing that you may have one day when your kids grow up. I'm having them every day. And
yeah,
we can never be progressive enough for our kids. Let me just warn you that.
No, that's very true. And I'm learning that, even this early in the game.
Let's go to Amin calling us from LA. Hi, Amin.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning, all.
Good morning. What's on your mind?
Can you hear me?
Good morning.
Yeah, we hear you.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Good. the key to victory and everything is don't let them divide us. Don't let them divide us along black and white, Republican and Democrat, left versus right. Don't, because it's not any of that took away our First Amendment right. Our First Amendment, we can't even speak about a certain topic about Israel or Zionism or certain topics. So, as a sign of how that type of thinking will solve our problems, look at the situation where Republicans, Green and Massey got with Ro Khanna, a Democrat, you know what I mean, and got the Epstein files released and had all the women to
allegedly. I mean, they're not released yet, but yeah, supposedly they will be.
Well, it's coming. It's coming. But don't let them, with the propaganda of Muslim versus Christian and all that kind of stuff. Don't, as they say in the old days, don't believe the hype.
Got you. Yeah. I am a big believer in unity, but I'm not going to unite with Jared Kushner. This is not going to happen unless he changes his philosophy. You know what I mean? It's not about him. It's nothing personal. I don't know him, never met him, but I know that he was the one that was speculating about the beachside property in Gaza and how and how that evolved into Trump Gaza and wherever we end up with a ceasefire is not about division over him being a Republican or him being white or him being Jewish or him being rich. It's a division over philosophy and what we consider right or wrong. So to me, it's an ethical conversation more than a conversation about identity or that kind of thing, if that makes sense. What do you make of that, Dr. Davis? I mean, we want to foster unity, but we also have to be, cognizant of who we're dealing with, right?
Right. I mean, Robert Jones Jr. teaches us that we can agree to disagree as long as our disagreement isn't rooted in the denial of my humanity and right to exist. And so I think, sort of that next level of not just having philosophical disagreements, right, but also ideological ones where, our ideas and ideals and, really the basis of our own personal, economic, and political theories and policies are in fundamental tension, right? When you actually don't think that I deserve the right to live or die, right? And we see this happening in policy spaces every single day with, the slow reactivation of SNAP benefits or U.S. aid going away and the detrimental impacts that had to people across the world. But there's a fundamental disagreement that we all have the right to, life, right? And I think that is a point at which we cannot simply just think about unity as just these matters of differences, but that these categories of differences have political implications, right? And there's power behind particular categories opposed to other ones. So, I think one of the things that's important, and we can see this, and you mentioned this a bit too, right, of like those of us who come from this tradition, the types of choices that we make, that, even amongst all Black people, we're not monolithic. We all don't believe and subscribe to the same things, and some of us more extreme than others, and the sort of Candace Owens of the world, right, who had very serious outpouring of love in the wake of Charlie Kirk's shooting, that we aren't on the same page about how we think about this human exercise. And so I think if we don't have shared ideological and political commitments, right, then what it means to be in a community is something very, very different. And we shouldn't have to make that quote-unquote unhealthy decision that Kiese Lehman often talks about in his work of having to join hand in hand with my oppressor who doesn't believe I have the right to be here.
Yeah, it's well said. Where we are right now, it reminds me of what the Christians, Christian scholars say, trouble don't last always. Yeah, that's true. And I am a big believer that this particular administration is overreaching so far and so blatant in their money grab and their disregard for people's ability to feed their families that they're going to be their own undoing. But in the meantime, how do we, the parents, the public, the people who aren't scholars, the people that aren't students, how do we help protect our universities, or is there anything we can do? It baffles me. I don't understand. Why does one university acquiesce and write these ginormous checks while other universities hold the line against this administration? And how do we become part of the solution in that space if we're not actually literal stakeholders in those institutions?
Well, I think the important thing to remember is that we're all stakeholders in higher education in some way, shape, or form, right? Whether that's your tax dollars going to subsidize that institution who is not paying taxes despite having the majority of the property in one's community. Again, as I mentioned, the erection of data centers and other real estate projects that take away land and resources from people who live in proximity to the university. So we all have not just a relationship to the university, but a vested interest on how the university ultimately decides to move. I think when it comes to the differentiated response by universities, part of it is to recognize who this administration has been going after, right? It has been going after the quote unquote, most prestigious universities in this country, in one part because they have resources that can be taken away, right? That many universities do not have access to in the form of the federal grants and research dollars that are coming out of Washington, D.C. They also have a certain prestige or a reputational capital that, this administration wants to be able to have control and dominion over. And we see that based on certain types of targets that are placed on, a Harvard University or a Johns Hopkins University, right? Both of which are institutions that are different from those who have occupied this particular administration, or even the president's own alma mater in the University of Pennsylvania, where I also taught and received a master's degree, that there's a reason and a strategy why they would go after it. And part of it goes to this idea that we talk about in higher education studies as institutional isomorphism. And that is that as organizations, universities in this case, are all trending in a particular direction based on the quote unquote standards set by these more elite and prestigious places. And so part of it is that if you get the top to follow suit, then the bottom is necessarily going to follow as well, right? Because that's the direction that they've had. And if I'm someone who already doesn't have a lot of resources, right, and I'm put, again, in an unhealthy position to have to cower and kowtow to a legislative body that says, we're going to take the little bit you do have away if you don't also comply with these edicts, and shutting down your DEI offices, or to suspend and perhaps fire professors who are engaged in, the research and teaching exercise around DEI, then again, they're kind of put in this very challenging position. Now, what I would say, and what I think is really important, I've been talking about a lot recently, but over the years, is that when we look at institutional leadership, right, and that can be a president, a provost, members of boards, governing boards, that what I see lacking consistently is a willingness and an ability to demonstrate moral and political courage. And Eddie Cole, who is a historian of higher education, who's right there at UCLA, has a really brilliant book, The Campus Color Line, and he talks about how university presidents were both a part of the problem and the solution in reconciling the racial divide in the United States by virtue of how they took action and what they did in those moments. And a lot of what he talks about is this, willingness and ability to demonstrate moral and political courage. And so what we need from institutional leaders and institutional stakeholders, which the students have shown us time and time again, selective groups of staff and faculty have shown us, is that we need an institution that is otherwise situated itself as a place of moral authority to demonstrate moral courage, right? To not sort of allow for this encroachment on the authority that those of us in the university have accumulated by engaging in deep study, but more importantly, not to allow those who seem to have no moral compass to dictate the direction our compass should go.
Talking with Dr. Charles H.F. Davis and you're listening to KBLA, Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominic DePrima when we come forward.
Are you coughing a lot, especially at night? Are you often short of breath? Are you using your rescue inhaler often? These could be signs that your asthma is not under control. To keep your asthma in check and help prevent an asthma attack, ask your healthcare provider for an asthma action plan. This is a personalized plan you create with your doctor that shows you what to do and what medicines to help control your asthma and to use when you're having a hard time breathing or when you're having an asthma attack. Please don't wait until you're having an asthma attack. Do something about it now. Schedule a visit with your healthcare provider today to make that action plan and take control of your asthma. For more tips and resources on the management of asthma, visit luma-edu.com. This message is brought to you by Amgen and AstraZeneca.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you, when we fight, we win. The Youth Justice Coalition is challenging America's addiction to incarceration and discrimination. YJC works to dismantle policies leading to mass incarceration, law enforcement violence, and the school-to-prison pipeline. Their approach, transformative justice, community intervention, free LA high school, legal defense, and system monitoring. YJC promotes safety without relying on prisons. Their goal, prevent system contact and help people exit the system through direct action, advocacy, and education. Want to get involved or need help? Call 323-235-4243. That's 323-235-4243. Join YJC in creating change. When we fight, we win. KBLA Talk 1580, your voice for justice. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
Roger and Tracy saved over $18,400. Cynthia was recovering from a family tragedy and saved over $10,300. If you are drowning in debt, then call Debt Blue. Debt Blue is a professional debt negotiation firm with over 20 years of experience helping people pay back a fraction of what they owe. Learn how to cut your debt up to half or maybe more. Be debt-free in 24 to 48 months, even with bad credit. With an A+ rating from the BBB, you can rest easy knowing Debt Blue is going to deliver guaranteed debt reduction. Debt Blue offers a success guarantee. You pay nothing unless your debt is reduced or completely resolved. That's right. You save money or it's free. Call now for significant debt relief and a free consultation. 800-200-8879. That's 800-200-8879. You don't have to declare bankruptcy. This program works if you owe $10,000, $20,000, or even $100,000 in debt. Call for your free consultation today. 800-200-8879. That's 800-200-8879.
Find a righteous rage and don't be afraid to say what you see. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
We are, and I really am glad you're here. I'm Dominique DePrima. I'm talking with Dr. Charles H.F. Davis. He's a scholar and an activist, and talking about where we are right now. I feel like you're right that the money, and the power is making a difference here. The shift in how we perceive what folks can and cannot do. I also think that Trump and his crew took a look at voting patterns, and people that go to college don't vote for him. People that get an education do not vote for him. And I think that it's that simplistic, that is one of the reasons why they're targeting universities in the way that they are. And back to Turning Point USA, that was their mission. Go in and turn the young people around. They saw us marching in 2020 and people were angry with their own kids for sympathizing with black people and taking up anti-racism.
Yeah, well, so here's the interesting thing, right? Like, we have this old adage in the black community, right? You know better, you do better, right? And one of the things about being in a place in which learning takes place, right, that is an exchange of ideas, that there is inquiry, that there are texts from people who have engaged in a long exercise of deep study, is that you learn information that changes your perspective and your opinion. And for all of the rhetoric on the right about having, sort of spaces of open inquiry and dialogue and discourse, that they often want those spaces to be singular in the narrative, and that being the master narrative, right? The narrative that is told by those who are in positions of power, often to the disproportionate harm of those of us who've been rendered to the margins. And the university provides sort of an opportunity for a variety of things to happen. And right, not just learning in the classroom based on the courses that you take, but also what we call interactional diversity, right? That you're in an environment that for many students is the most diverse environment they have ever been in. We know that schools now are equally, if not more segregated than they had ever been at the height of Jim Crow. And so college brings together people from all kinds of walks of life where you have to engage and learn how to work across difference, and that faculty and staff are facilitating that. And one of the consequences of this, right, is actually being able to see one another's humanity. And what we've seen in organizations like Turning Point USA, which has chapters on college and university campuses, the Young Americans for Freedom Foundation, who has these organizations, is that they are trying to sort of reclaim their own ownership of the institution as something that serves and supports their needs. And the genesis of higher education in this country is one that has deeply been committed to a racial project that has advantaged those who had access to the institutions, which were predominantly white, often affluent families, as something that was a resource to preserve the status quo. And so this is why I think, to your point, there is this, affront to the university space as somewhere that is providing the quote-unquote type of enlightenment that ones would otherwise like to see, and why we have seen people like the Charlie Kirks and the Ben Shapiros and other conservative voices try to take up space on the college campus as full-grown adults trying to bait college kids, and often them getting cooked left and right by these kids who have done the reading, right, who have studied, who are on debate teams, who are in student government or in their student unions. And that is a deep threat to this, otherwise unearned possession of a country that they didn't even build. And so I think you're absolutely right that is where they're seeing a challenge of sort of the fundamental resource that has allowed for them to accrue certain aspects of power. When it becomes democratized, right, and diversified, that poses a threat to the power structure.
Paul is in my YouTube chat saying that he thinks Citizens United is part of what got us here. Do you agree with that?
Well, I mean, there's a part of a conversation to be had. I don't think we can reduce it to any one sort of organization, particularly one conservative organization, right? Because there are so many of them. So Citizens United is but a part of any number of iterations, like the Turning Point USA's, the Young Americans for Freedom, the Young Republicans chapters that have started on some campuses. And there is this connection, which I think is important to draw back attention to think tanks, right? And so we know like places like the Heritage Foundation that are instrumental in standing up Project 2025 that incubate certain types of conservative thought leadership, and the people that are being heralded by members of this administration all come from a similar tradition that has a number of tentacles that reach out into a variety of places from D.C. all the way and across the country. And so I think we have to be cautious of any one organization, right, as the sort of focal point, although there are a number of them. And to see like how the money is moving and how the influence is moving, right? The Young Americans for Freedom Foundation is led by the former governor of Wisconsin, right, who is allowing and moving young people to do a lot of dirty work, to include, submitting freedom of information requests against faculty members and against multicultural student support centers, right, that they are ingratiating and trying to move young people in a particular direction that they themselves aren't necessarily moving and are insulated by the work of these young people who they've manipulated.
And all of these organizations and that, lead to Supreme Court decisions like this that lay in wait for, elections where they can implement their agendas, ultimately lead to a further and further rightward trend, which I don't think is forever. I could talk to you all day, Dr. H.F. Davis. Thank you so much for being with us. You have a conference. You have an online event, which we didn't talk about, which I wanted to talk about. I don't know if you have a couple minutes more that you can start out the next top of the hour, or if you want me to talk about it without you. You can stay with me for a couple minutes.
Yeah, I could do a quick hit just to talk about Black Policy Lab for the next hour.
Yeah, we've got Jamali B. Mumia. He's running a little behind. I really meant to talk about that. We'll talk about it after news, traffic, and sports, and then I'll let you get back to your work. Thank you, Dr. Davis. That's next on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with BIN News Now. Chicago's Black Mayor Brandon Johnson warns the city could face a shutdown if a budget isn't passed by year's end.
A shutdown benefits nobody, least of all the poor and working people of Chicago who rely upon critical services that the city provides.
He's open to compromise but won't cut programs for the poor. Georgia prosecutors say 1-8 Trey Blood's gang leader Jamar Ramsey lured kids with ice cream trucks and bounce houses while running a multi-state crime spree. 16 members are now convicted for murder, shootings, and drug trafficking across 10 counties from 2019 to